When is the right time to bring in an editor when you're working on your book? That's the topic that I want to cover in this video, because what I see oftentimes is authors and writers taking their book almost to completion, and then where they should hand it off to an editor, or where they should bring an editor into the project, they instead start editing themselves, and then that opens up a whole new can of worms, actually more like Pandora's box, to go back and start self-editing as opposed to bringing in a professional, objective opinion, which is really what I think an editor, more than anybody else in the writing and publishing process, can provide. So how do you know when is the right time to bring an editor in? In my opinion, in my experience, I think it is a little bit before you feel like you actually want one. So specifically, if you've got a first draft of a manuscript, that's the right time, as opposed to completing the first draft and then going back through it and going back through it again and sitting on it and waiting and hemming and hawing and losing perspective. I think the half-life of enthusiasm starts to drop off pretty quickly after you've finished your book, or once you've completed the main content of your book, versus when it starts to feel like a chore. That time can feel very accelerated if you're sitting on it and stewing on it and not bringing in anybody else, but rather just marinating in your content, simmering in your own ideas, as it were. And it starts to make you lose perspective, but it can also bring out, a little bit of improvements. You can make marginal improvements by going back and editing yourself what you've written. My recommendation is to bring in an editor right after you've completed the core content for the book, because an editor is best equipped to evaluate your book as a whole, as opposed to looking at it chapter by chapter or looking at sections or a disjointed section of content. Much better, in fact, to have an editor come in and at least see the first full pass, the first full draft of what you've done in terms of what you've created for your book. That will allow you to, one, I would say, this can be an uncomfortable experience. So let me just speak to that, when the first person that most authors bring in to their writing project is going to be an editor, and it's going to be uncomfortable because it's really the first time that somebody else is really reading your book. And of course, it's not in a finished state. So that can add to the uncomfortability, add to the feelings of vulnerability when you know that what you're sharing isn't actually your final and best work. But guess what? That's exactly what the editor is going to help you make it become. So getting over that psychological hurdle of thinking that you can edit yourself and that if you just take another 2 weeks and go through it all again, you're somehow going to miraculously finish the book and now no longer really need an editor. That's not the time when you go looking for an editor. Much better to be, and if you do take that approach, meaning you self-edit and you rewrite and re-edit, and then you hand it off to an editor thinking, hey, this is already great. I just want someone to do proofreading and, cross the T's and dot the I's. You could be in for quite a surprise if you get back editorial feedback that runs counter to how you have been thinking about your project. So it's actually better to, and that could then send you down a path of rewriting and editing or even becoming disillusioned, and we want to avoid that. So I think the better thing is to hand it off to an editor, and in fact bring an editor in slightly before you feel like it's ready for anybody else to see, but making that part of the conversation where you're saying, look, this is just the first pass of the manuscript. Keep that in mind. You could caveat it any way you want. Editors are used to dealing with authors that are in a semi-state of neurosis around handing over their book when they don't feel like it's actually presentable yet. And even if it's not, that's okay too, because more or less what you want is an editor to become your partner and sort of lock arms and march towards the finish line together. It's not an adversarial relationship, or it shouldn't be. And if you start to feel like you're in an adversarial relationship with your editor, that's a huge red flag. So, I think you can avoid having a bad experience by bringing an editor in a little bit before you're ready, caveat it however you want, but then make sure that you've got a good working relationship, and that the feedback that you're starting to get on your content and on your manuscript lines up with the overall direction you want to go. You may not agree with the feedback that you're specifically getting or receiving. It may not be a change that you want to make, but if you can see that the editor shares your vision for where you want to take this book, then you're going down the right track. So in terms of the core idea I want you to take away from this video, it's simple. That before you actually feel ready or feel like you've got something presentable that a general reading public or even friends or family would want to see, that's the right time to bring in an editor. And let's say that that's maybe 80-85% of the way there. Meaning you could still be missing an introduction. You could still be missing a small auxiliary section of the book or have some details to put in place. But if you've substantially created the main body of work, the main content, the main ideas, the main story, that's the time to have somebody come in and look at it as a whole and give you feedback on it as a whole. Whereas you've been writing it section by section, you've been writing it chapter by chapter. Now somebody's going to take the time to digest that in its entirety and give you that top-down feedback as well as bottoms-up feedback. And just to be clear, we're not talking about a proofreader here. This is an editor, somebody that's coming in with actual developmental ideas and structural support. And sure, perhaps they're also looking at spelling and grammar, but you can always pass the final edited manuscript through a proofreader and spend substantially less, but also make the best use of their time, because you're not looking for content feedback from a proofreader, and vice versa. You're not working on the whole point of this video is don't work on your book to the point of exhaustion or fatigue where all you think it needs is a line editor before bringing in any editorial support. And if you can ride that edge and share your work a little bit before it feels totally comfortable, but then also realize that after you've written the first draft of the book, there's going to be rounds of editing and rewrites. And if you account for that in your mind, then you won't feel as stressed or perhaps anxious as you could. So with that, if this is helpful, if you're working on your book, if you have been wondering whether to bring an editor in, share this with somebody who needs to see this video, and or leave me a comment below on any new perspective or ideas you got from watching this video. And I hope this serves you. I'll see you in a future video. And here's to your success.